Hey folks, welcome back. So the last video we were talking about those smoke grenades, and it was kind of gave me an idea because of the powder when it exploded. I kind of got this gun really dirty, and it kind of made me wonder. Well, oftentimes we see a lot of real steel tests where they actually run them through the desert and dust test and see how it performs. So I kind of wonder, well, I wonder how this performs because, from a functional standpoint, the operation, is kind of similar. It requires just cycling with a bolt, and so it's a lot more prone to jamming if, you're exposed to the elements, particularly sand. So why don't we try that? The first thing, it's a little dusty right now, as you can probably tell, but that's really because of the powder from the last video. I haven't cleaned the outside, but I did clean the bolt. So you'll see the bolt is nice and clean right there and oiled as it was brand new. And so we're going to try to do about 10 shots of, in a magazine after it's been exposed. So the first round we'll do continue with the baby powder. And I don't think the baby powder is going to affect it that much. We saw in the last video it didn't do a whole lot of disruption. And so we're going to try to drop it directly into it. We're going to turn it sideways and fire it a few times. And we might even try it where we are shooting it, instead of shooting it normally, we're going to cant the gun a little bit. And so have like the baby powder resting in there and then firing it. And that's not unusual in the sense that a lot of folks, there's a lot of tactical moves these days, and that's one way of tactically shooting, I guess. So it's not unreasonable to try that. Why you would have baby powder on there, I don't know, but that's one thing just to test it. Now, again, baby powder has a lot of talc in it, so I don't think, in some cases that can actually be used as kind of a dry lubricant. Now, the fact that there already is silicone oil lubricant on the bolt carrier group here might introduce some problems, but we'll see. But I don't anticipate any problems really to occur with the baby powder. And then the next thing we're going to try to do is, and I think there will be problems though, is with baking soda. Now, if you can see here, this is just your standard baking soda here, but this is a lot more granular. It's a lot more similar to powder or sand, basically. And it's definitely not really acting as a lubricant. So we'll see. I expect this to trip up the gun. So we'll see. Alright, so this is the first shot here. We're going to do the baby powder first. This is a loaded magazine. We're going to try this first. Load that in. Alrighty. Now, so it's a little dusty, but again, that's just that's not really related to the bolts, it's just in the outer surface. So we're going to do it like a kind of a puff, kind of like that. That's a generous helping right there. Okay, and we're not going to shake anything off, but we are going to turn it sideways, and whatever falls off, into the correct shooting position, whatever falls off will just fall off, and then we'll fire it. Again, this is quite a bit. It's kind of like I'm using powdered sugar on my donuts here, but I don't think this is going to cause much of a problem. I expect 10 rounds to go flawlessly with this. Okay, so that performed pretty much as expected. Remember, this gun, it's on an unrelated issue, but it does cycle in terms of bursts because the semi-auto function is kind of wonky right now. So don't take that as an issue or anything like that with the gun. That's how it just normally performs at baseline. Okay, so, but pretty much flawless, performance, all things being considered, as expected. Let's try it one more time in a similar fashion, but this time we're going to fire it while canting the gun. That way, hopefully the powder will maybe even get into the action a little bit. Because as you noticed in that last screenshot, the bolt, even though the outer surface, I mean, this side's clean basically, but this side's really pretty dusty. But inside, the oil is still pretty well slicked right there. There's not a lot of residue inside. A little bit in the chamber right there, but not a whole lot. So let's close the bolt and let's do the same thing again, but we're gonna fire it sideways, and hopefully maybe some of that powder will maybe fall into the action and maybe affect it a little bit. But again, because talc is a kind of a dry lubricant, I don't think it's gonna do a whole lot of problems. Let's give it a little healthy sprinkling right there. There you go. I think that's a good amount. And then we'll fire from there and see what happens. Now, if you see in these pictures here, because even though there's all this dust or this powder put on it, when the round fires, if you notice in slow-mo, the gases actually are pushing the dust and the powder away from the receiver here, so it's coming out of the ejection port. So a lot of the dust actually isn't coming back into the gun, it's actually leaving it. So as you can see in these pictures here, there's only a small amount of dust in the action, really where it's this part that's facing the outside. But for the most part, it's pretty clean. Okay, so that was not super unexpected, but I was a little bit nervous, might jam it up a little bit. This next one, I'm not 100% on. I'm not as confident. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna lock the bolt back, okay, and we're gonna leave it open, and insert a new magazine right now, okay. And what we're gonna do is actually we're going to douse it right now and get some in the action directly, because as you can tell, even then we're not getting a whole lot. Let me get a flashlight real quick, because we're not getting a whole lot of dust into the action anyway, even with that last maneuver. So a little bit, in the chamber, as you can tell on top right there, mostly on the side that's facing the ejection port. But if you look in the inside, further inside, it's relatively clean. So what little amount that's going in there is probably actually helping keeping the gun cycling smoothly, actually, because of the talc. One thing that I note is that this doesn't, notice how there's no lugs on the bolt face. That's just the nozzle. That's because this one has the broken, all the lugs is broken off the bolt face. So it might create less resistance because there's less parts to meet contact with the grooves or the lugs down there. So it might be less likely to jam. Not a huge thing, but just something that might make it a little bit less likely to jam. All right. So with that, let's go ahead and try this. Okay. Let's see what happens. Oh man, I'm gonna have to spend a lot of time cleaning this once it's over, but I don't know if this is really gonna work or not, so we'll see. All right, close the bolt. Okay, it closes at least. All right, let's see if this fires. Looks like rounds are coming out fine. A little dusty, obviously, but look at that. Let's see if I'm gonna hold the bolt stop down and see if it still locks back though. Well, it's a little low in gas probably, but doing fine, I think. Let's check out the target too. So And you can see the target here. Rounds are coming out fine. Normal groupings, nothing problematic here. Now, if you take a look here, this is the results of the insides. As you can tell, it's a lot dirtier now. This is a more quality images of what you can see there. So it's definitely caked. All the coating, it's coating it completely inside. So, but it still works. So that's really surprising. It's actually good to know, which is kind of cool. Unlike before, where it was kind of, still kind of clean, but now it's definitely dirty. Alright, so now on for the real test. The fine, gritty baking soda. That's very similar to sand and fine dust. Obviously, the baking or the baby powder is basically a dry lubricant, so nothing really major, unless you kind of like doused it where it's to the point where you physically can't even like compact the bolt carrier group and put it into battery, then it would jam, obviously. But for a situation or environment where you toss it on there, no big deal. This, however, I think will be what causes this gun to jam. So let's find out. All right. Oh, before we do that though, let's pop this open and take a look at the one of the nice things that baby powder shows. It kind of spreads the residue everywhere, so you can kind of see where it's landing inside the bolt carrier. So in the receiver, pretty much, a little bit here and there chunks, but not too much. If you look at the underside of it, kind of a little bit there near the chamber, but not a whole lot. And then let's remove the, so notice how it's all white right here, right? But if you pull it out, it's really confined just to that area. It doesn't like travel much further, much back. It's a little bit, it's not as shiny right here. This is where it's like kind of the cleanest. It gets a little bit dirtier. And of course, the actual area where powder meets it. Flip it underside down here, a little bit. And then the back side, not a whole lot. I mean, I think a lot of the oils did soak it up a little bit too. But all things being considered, the system is a pretty closed system. If you watch a lot of those torture test videos out there where they try to throw an AK versus an AR-15 into like the mud, one of the advantages is that contrary to popular beliefs about the reliability of an AK, the M4 or the AR-15 platform actually uses a very closed system. So unless the bolt is locked to the rear, if it's in a closed position, it's harder for dirt to get in there. And so it's actually more reliable from that standpoint. But that's a huge debate for another video. But for the most part, it seems to fit in this theme here that it's the closed system seems to work in its favor since you don't see it spreading dirt as much around. But now let's put that to the test. All right, here we go. Some fine baking soda right here. So we gotta get it quite liberally apply this. All right, so that's quite a bit, right? So we're gonna try to fire it and see what happens with this situation. I think it might fail. And if this doesn't fail, then when we cycle the bolt back and pour it into the chamber, for sure that will fail, I think. All right, so this test has been going out pretty well so far. Let's see how this performs on the last test where we're going to be introducing the powder directly into the chamber of an open bolt. Now, I'm not going to pour it down to the barrel like that. That's going to be very ridiculous. But let's just say, we kind of got a little bit, like kind of like a reasonable amount like that, This probably, I don't know, this could probably fail. And in reality, if this, for some reason, you got all this sand in it and you're in the middle of a game, you would probably try to cant the gun a little bit to dump some of it out before cycling it. But in this case, let's try to do a worst case scenario. You just had to insert a magazine right there. Okay. I don't know if this will even close and go into battery, but let's see what happens. Let me get some light on it so we can take a look at this. All right, let's see here. So this is the gun right here. There's a round right there. Let's see if I can send the bolt home. There's quite a bit of baking soda in there. Okay, I think it closed completely. There's kind of a gap right there, but I think that's enough to still fire the gun though. Okay, so let's see what happens and hopefully this works. Alright, so now this is baking soda inside the gun here. Let's try a couple rounds. Okay, fires. Wow. Fires. Couple rounds there. It's hitting the target. I'm going to try the bolt lock function, see if it locks back. Good. Uh-oh. Let's pull out the magazine slowly. Notice how here the round is not pushed up against the lip of the magazine. So this could cause some failure to feed right here. So let's see if we can knock it up a little bit. Yeah, there we go. So now it's closer to the lip. I'm not going to count that as a failure, but let's see here. Okay, nothing's coming out of the gun. So I'm going to hold the bolt, stop down, and fire it and see if it locks back at least. Okay, it locks back. Just as expected, though, it's an issue with the magazine, though. The magazine will not push up the round because the grit is preventing the rounds from loading into the chamber. So let's see if we can... I'm going to have a good time having to clean this one out. All right, well, let's see if we can pull out a fresh magazine that maybe doesn't have all that dust on it. And let's try that again. Okay, there we go. Okay, so that works a lot better. This one's now out of rounds. So it's not so much the gun that jams up in this case. I mean, it certainly can, I guess. But your biggest link, or the biggest weakness, the weakest link, sorry, is going to be in the magazine. So I really can't fix that right now. Looks like the spring in there is stuck. And see, if we can show that. See, it should have a lot more spring tension, but it's kind of just like wobbling around in there. So that's why it's not feeding into the gun anymore. But if I were to just, tilt it upside down like this so that it falls to the top, close the round, or close the chamber, and then fire around, then it does it. Yeah, look at the rest. There's still BBs kind of lodged down there, so that's the result right there. So watch out for that sand. It will gunk up your gun. But I think it did kind of surprisingly well, so pretty good there. Now I got to go clean this gun now. Alright, so let's take this apart and see how this gun looks like. So I'm going to try to take down both these pins here. Oops. And we'll take a look at the results on the inside. And since this is really the last test of it, it seems like we found our biggest issue here. We're going to try to tear it down by we're just completely separate the upper and lower receiver together, just to um, just to, just to follow up and see what it looks like on the inside. Okay, so oops. Okay. All right, so let's start with the lower receiver first. Let me grab this flashlight here. So, you know, a little bit of dust here and there on the, it's like fine powder there. The back seems pretty clean though. And then of course the mag well, this part is completely dusty, but that's to be expected. Now, let's go on to this part. Now, we can tell here, this part's really dusty. If we flip it underneath there, it's actually kind of surprising because this part here, the chamber, there's some dust going on right there. This part here is still pretty clean. You can still see the oil from earlier this morning in there. Fine particles of dust on the side of the magazine well, or yeah, on the upper receiver, but not enough to really cause a stoppage. What really caused a stoppage was actually the magazine. So when we switched magazines, we were able to successfully continue cycling and continue operations. So now this is the bolt carrier group here. Again, similar to what we saw this morning, despite dumping debris directly into the breech of the gun, or not the breech, but yeah, well, I guess you can say that. You know, we're still getting mostly accumulation on the side, a little bit on the other side as well. A lot on the bolt face. Take a look at that. See, look at that. That's like caked in there. But you know, nothing so much in the rear here where it would cause a stoppage, or you know, a significant degree of stoppage. On a side note, I have seen someone stick a marshmallow in the back and then they cycle the gun and it still worked. So I didn't think, you know, this was going to be, you know, there's a good chance this could still work, which it did. But I guess, you know, the magazine's just tripping it up. So underneath here, you can see the same thing where that's where the dust concentrates. That's where we're throwing it, most of it in it. And the rest is kind of pretty much clean. So obviously it's a little bit, you know, it's not running as smoothly because there's like, you know, grit and everywhere in it. But for the most part, I think it did really well. So we're gonna just clean this out now and then go back. But if I didn't have the time to clean it in the middle of a field or in the middle of the game, you know, the best bet is just change out magazines. And clear it out, and then you can still continue to run this gun. You know, it's not, obviously it's not the most ideal situation to have it this dirty, but it's still pretty a well-functioning, high-functioning gun. So I think they did a great job with this. Cool. Hope you folks enjoy the content and found this a little bit amusing to see how well it can do in a dust test here. All right, see you folks next time. Oh, and I forgot to mention, this is how it looks like originally. Or actually, well, originally it looked like this too, but after me cleaning it and going through about like an hour of tearing it down and scrubbing it out, this is what it should look like normally.